Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Todos Santos. This is episode 9. Today we're going to be going back to the Old Town area, and we're going to be kind of filling in that last little bit inside the wall, or at least part of it today. And the main thing we're going to be building in this episode is kind of a tiered pedestrian plaza type thing, but we're starting off with just kind of this basic parking garage that's clipped into the ground here, because I was thinking a place like this would be a pretty big tourist destination, even though a lot of them wouldn't be using, rental cars or personal vehicles or whatever. It would still amount to a lot of need for accommodation for parking, because that's just how things are in this city. So I decided to put a parking garage in here, but there wasn't really space, and I didn't want it to kind of take up its own city block. So I decided to kind of have it built into the slope here, and use that retaining wall to kind of actually cut off one of the rows of parking. So it just looks like, you would drive up there, and then instead of having parking on the right there, it would just be this kind of wall that makes up the difference between the two terrain heights there. And just some pretty basic detailing. One thing you can do when you have like big slopes like this is get those retaining walls in and kind of make like a shape, and then just fill it in with greenery and trees and stuff, because that's something you definitely see is these kind of areas filled in with vegetation, because it just looks nice, and it kind of hides, in the game at least, it hides the imperfections in the terrain. So we have these kind of big green space areas here, and I didn't want to have too much of that in this area, because it is kind of like an older location that's been more developed and had more time to be developed. But I thought it would be cool to have a little bit of it, because this is along a longer avenue, kind of a higher capacity avenue. So maybe they'd have these areas kind of in between these little commercial zones, where they have this kind of nice just green space. Obviously this isn't like the nicest looking green space ever, but it's something. It's not like a big park or anything, it's completely fenced off, but it's just I thought a cool spot that really hasn't been developed yet, and just kind of, it has that sort of not abandoned vibe, but kind of that nice, just almost a little bit of a wild area in the city. And so now we're getting back to using this seawall asset, and what we're doing here is, so we need a way for pedestrians to be able to get from the parking garage to this main kind of commercial street you can see up here to the left where these roads converge. And we need a way for the pedestrians to be able to get there, because obviously most people who are driving here will be using the parking garage and then walking over there. So I wanted to have this kind of large pedestrian avenue coming along here. So we use the seawall, and then we have this kind of curb network, which I wanted to clip into it to kind of be like a transition between these kind of like things that are down like at the pedestrian level and this kind of really tall wall that's towering above them. So I just wanted something a little more friendly to the pedestrians, so they don't just have to walk next to this kind of dark wall above them. And then we start using this ploppable surface asset. It's a prop actually, which is really nice. Because it doesn't come with all the issues that you have with decals, and because we're working on a flat surface here, pretty much flat, because we use the align heights function of move it to make sure all the nodes are lined up. So it is flat, and as you can see, it has this kind of cool effect where it actually is, the flat area is beneath the exact height of the sidewalk here. So you can see it actually clips underneath that and has this, it makes for this really smooth looking transition between the ploppable surface and the sidewalk. So and because we do have this pedestrian path running under here, I've noticed that Sims actually generally will pretty much always take a pedestrian path over a sidewalk, even if they're like clipped together. So they do prefer that pedestrian path instead of the sidewalk. So the sidewalk is just kind of like a buffer between the cars and the bollards there that are further protecting the pedestrians. So it's pretty cool. It's functional, and a lot of people use it. It's really cool. And then, so I did want to have, because this is kind of like a high detail or a high focus area, I did want to have those expansion joints here just to kind of show that it's, these are like pavement slabs here that are put down. maybe that used to be the walkway, and there used to be like a parking lot there or something, and they redeveloped it into a kind of a pedestrian-focused area. And speaking of pedestrian-focused areas, now we're starting on this tiered plaza. That's kind of the main focus of this video. And so basically, it's a pretty significant slope as far as like the pedestrian scale goes. Like if this were cars, it'd be nothing. But because I didn't really want the whole thing to be sloped, I wanted to have kind of like tiers to it. So we have this kind of, there's a set of stairs that will come down from the top to that first kind of like landing area, and then there'll be a smaller set of stairs that go down to the bottom, and then that meets up just with the road level there. And this will kind of, we'll see in I think the next episode, we connect this up with a whole kind of pedestrian road network that's down. It's both inside the castle walls and then outside once we get through. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but you'll see next episode. And so we have this big staircase coming down, and we do actually make it functional after we kind of do this basic layout. And we do that using some pedestrian paths, but you'll see that in a minute. But basically, a lot of people end up using it, and they do use this whole kind of pedestrian network that we end up creating here, which I think is really cool. It's, road networks are fun. But it is kind of fun every once in a while to just try something different and see what you can do, especially with the Sims, because they're kind of weird the way they work and move around and stuff. So it's kind of cool to do something like this that actually functions pretty nicely. So I actually recorded this a couple months ago now. The gameplay, I mean, not the voiceover. So I'm trying to remember exactly what inspired me to do this build. I don't remember anything specific that was like the inspiration behind it. But I guess kind of like just the general idea of making this a more pedestrian focused area, because we are in the old town, narrow lanes, not as vehicle focused, other than the parking garage over there. But I just thought it would be cool to have kind of this really big space dedicated to pedestrians. And like I mentioned, we're going to continue that over the course of the next couple episodes. But I do have some vague memories of like in old San Juan, there were some areas kind of like this, not exactly like this. They were kind of more integrated into the road system. But I think just that kind of the general idea of like that kind of like pedestrian plaza area is what inspired this. And I just really just kind of did my thing and tried to have fun with it, and I think it turned out pretty nicely. And really, this whole series is gonna kind of be like that, I think, in that I'm not trying to like replicate San Juan or any other specific city. I'm kind of going more for like kind of cherry picking ideas that I like, putting them in, replicating things where I think that would work. But for the most part, I really want to be able to do my own thing in the city and not be locked down to doing, building like specific buildings in specific areas. For example, in a couple episodes, we're actually going to be doing kind of a ferry depot or a ferry stop, I guess, that will be ferrying people, I guess, across the bay to like the other side of, the main part of the city. And there's definitely, it's pretty much in the exact same spot as one in San Juan. But other than the fact that it's there, I didn't even look at the one in San Juan preparing for that build. So I just think I'm really trying to take it pretty easy and not get too worried about trying to, make things perfect or exactly like San Juan, because I really just want to be able to have fun with this series and have it be pretty flexible so that it kind of morphs with or fits with what I'm interested in the game and what you guys want to see. So if there is something that you want to see that I haven't mentioned or that you think I might not do, definitely let me know in the comments, and I will definitely take all your ideas into consideration. I read every comment, and I really like seeing feedback from you guys, so that would be cool if you have anything that you're interested in. So now I should probably talk about what I'm doing, because this looks kind of ridiculous right now. But basically what I'm trying to do is I'm using just the vanilla pedestrian paths initially to try to get, so I can see where they go and try to get people to use this pedestrian plaza as a way to get around. So I have it clipped into the stairs there, and then I'm trying to make it so that people use every path. So it's not just like they're using one set of stairs. So I've connected, at the bottom of each stair, I've connected each walkway to one node at the top of that smaller staircase on each side. And I'm hoping that that means people will kind of distribute themselves out along the various paths, and then, you know, converge at the top of these staircases and then go down. And that's what I hoped, and it works pretty well. The only issue is people do use their bikes on this, and it looks totally ridiculous. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. That's not something I'm too worried about. I suppose I could probably like make a district just for this plaza and ban bikes on sidewalks maybe. I don't know if that would do it, but I'm not worried about it. It doesn't look too bad. It's just kind of weird. And then of course, once we get this all figured out, I come back here and replace all of these with those invisible pedestrian paths, which you'll see in just a second. And those are on the workshop. You can check out my collection in the description, and you should be able to find those on there. They're really useful because otherwise you have to use the vanilla pedestrian paths, which can cause problems with Surface Painter and other things, and you know, they don't look great. So if you want to kind of design your own walkable area and then and then have people actually use it, those invisible pedestrian paths are really good to have, and they're not too much of a load on your system either, I don't think, as far as that kind of asset goes. So yeah, definitely check those out. So now we're just doing some basic detailing. I'm using these PPG benches, so people actually come around and sit there. You can see one guy there hanging out. I think this would be a pretty nice park to go to. It'd be kind of like a nice relaxing area, kind of in the midst of this up-and-coming old town district, which would definitely be more of like an urban, bustling kind of vibe. And so I think it's definitely essential to have these kind of areas in any city. But specifically, I think this part of town kind of just called for that, something, you know, a little less commercial focus than the rest of this area. Okay, so now we have this statue of, I think, Jesus or somebody like that. And I put this ridiculously horrible set of curves around it that look like some kind of like horrible smiley face. I don't know. It looks awful. I don't know why I ever thought that looked good. So I'm going to come back and change that off camera, of course. But yeah, I'm not sure how that passed my quality control test, which definitely does not exist. So now I wanted some railings here. I was originally going to keep the vanilla, like a couple of the vanilla pedestrian paths there because they have kind of a nice looking railing. But I just decided to manually do it. I thought the stone would fit better than the metal of the vanilla one. And then some more railings here on these, because obviously you can't just have like an open staircase with a 30-foot drop. That's not very safe. So just filling that in, making sure that these Sims can commute safely. And these walls, actually, the texture fits in like almost perfectly with the stair assets there. I think that's kind of just a nice little coincidence. And then I wasn't sure exactly what to do with this little green area here, so I decided to have kind of a more natural, just a little like buffer in between the street and the park, just so people who go in there, again, like I want it to be like a nice, like relaxing place for people to go if this were a real city. So there's a little bit of foliage to block out some of the noise and, the sights of like the traffic and the commercial district that we'll have down here. And I wanted to go for kind of the more like local looking plants. Like, for example, we have it's actually, the asset is an olive tree, but I was kind of going for, I'm not sure exactly how you say it, but it might be like a ceiba tree or ceiba tree. But those are, when I think of Puerto Rico, that's like the tree, that's like the plant that I think of. They're really cool looking trees. Definitely go check those out if you're into foliage or that kind of thing. I'm not an expert or anything, but I definitely remember seeing some of those in Puerto Rico. So I kind of wanted to try to have that there. And then now we're doing this raised parking lot up here with this kind of that curved area. I decided to have it as kind of like a pickup drop-off spot. Of course, there's no actual like functionality in the game for that beyond taxis. But so I just had some cars parked there as if there's some kind of event going on right now. And people do use the parking in this area a lot because it's so dense. So it's usually pretty filled up. So I think that's a kind of a good excuse for having the cars there all the time. And then I wanted to have this kind of like almost overlook here that looks over the commercial area down here that we'll build in another episode. So I just used some ploppable pavement and kind of fill that in. And then we'll come back and we'll use the amazing concrete retaining wall asset network, right here, and we'll drag that around. So I like to build the networks outside of what I'm actually trying to like clip it into, because once you get it in with a bunch of other props and nodes and segments and stuff, it's really hard to find it. Even with Move It, selecting it with Move It, it's still pretty hard. So I like to figure out how many like actual segments I need and just build those out wherever I have space, where there aren't any other networks or anything. And then I just use Move It to drag it over to where it has to be. If you need to, you can use align heights to make sure it's not going to be all wavy or jagged or whatever. And then I wanted to continue using these wrought iron fences here. So I'm just using Move It to copy them around, and I think it makes for a nice kind of like, I was going for like definitely an older aesthetic, because it's, this is right next to a theater, and I'm imagining that this is like the theater's private parking lot. So I'm imagining this is probably like a pretty old theater. So yeah, I wanted to kind of go along with that look. And now we're moving down here into this kind of commercial area that has a little bit of industry and a little bit of office space. This, I think, is an office building, this big one here, and then there's that awesome bike shop asset there. So this is, an office with maybe like a little bit of a cafe area down here. Again, I'm using those PPG tables, which I love to do this for these kind of outdoor cafe and restaurant areas, because you can actually see people coming in and out and using them. It's just, it's really cool. And then, like I said, there's a little bit of an industrial thing kind of over here on the corner. I just thought, it is an old area, and maybe there are some buildings where people don't want to sell their land, or, they have a business they want to keep or whatever. So there are some holdouts that have these kind of, not as nice areas in this place that's being a little bit gentrified. And then we just have a couple stores over here, and we don't finish up this entire area in this episode. We'll do that next episode when we do that kind of pedestrian area. You'll see, it's pretty sweet. And then I'm not going too heavy on the detailing. Like I, for example, don't even want to deal with that garage, so I just cover it up with bushes. And then this area, some of these short sloped areas are really hard to figure out what to do. But because I have this kind of like leftover industrial aesthetic over here, I decided to just have an empty lot. In the back here, we have some, just some dirt, like a dirt yard with some crates and stuff in it that we'll put there right now. Yep. But then beyond that, there's pretty much just a little bit of an empty lot there. Just some vegetation. Another one of those kind of awkward green spaces that I feel like logically, I don't know if it makes sense, but it looks pretty cool from above. And I think if you were like walking by it, you wouldn't even think twice about it. So if it like satisfies those criteria, I'm pretty happy with it. I don't think it has to make perfect sense to be a good fit for a City Skylines series, because you're never going to achieve like absolute realism, and I think that's just that's not really the point of the game, at least the way I play it. So yeah, now we're filling in. This is pretty cool. So we have this little side street here that we didn't actually do anything with when we originally built the old town, and I wasn't sure what to do with this at first, and then I just started putting some buildings down, and I decided to have just kind of a nice tiered little neighborhood here, filling in just, all the same buildings we've used in the old town. And I'm actually having some issues with these. I don't know, I think it might be Rico, when I switched from the quote-unquote fixed Rico mod to the newer fixed version, which I believe is by the original author now. The other one was by someone else who had fixed it. Or something like that, because that was fairly recent. But last time I booted up the game and loaded the save, pretty much all my commercial buildings were saying that there are no goods to sell, and I looked at like the traffic routes and everything, and there aren't any trucks going to them. And we do have a little bit of industry, so I'm not sure what the issue is. I'm assuming it's a mod, most likely Rico, because it does mess with the commercial or the zoning side of things, commercial side of things. So I hope that works itself out. I have been running the simulation quite a bit while playing, and it's not really working itself out. But then again, people aren't like leaving the city in droves, so I might just leave it for now. But I'm going to look into that, and hopefully we can fix it, because I do want this city to be a somewhat functional. Obviously, when you play like modded like this, it's not going to be perfect. But I don't want to have it just be a complete mess. Look nice, but be a complete mess. I want it to function somewhat nicely. So now, yeah, okay. So this is probably one of my favorite things in the city so far. So we have this pedestrian tiered plaza thing that we built, and then we have this road, and they were like right at the same height. So I decided to just have them meet up, as if this is like, this is a road where locals would drive, and they might park there if they live there. But otherwise, this is just for pedestrian use. Like any through traffic would just be pedestrians. So it just meets up, and there's something about the way the textures come together. I just think it's super cool looking. I hope you guys like it. But yeah, like I said, this is just kind of one of those weird happy accidents that I think works out pretty nicely. And then, so I wanted to have something here to fill in this space, because there's such a big slope here still. And I decided that I'd do this kind of weird thing, clipping a few churches together to make it look like one really tall building. It looks pretty odd, though. We'll come back in just a second once we stop messing around with this. Just fixing these decals here. But we come back and we actually put a different church on the bottom right here, yeah. So it looks a little more normal now. Like, it's more like it's two churches back to back instead of one giant building. Because one giant building, I mean, that just doesn't look realistic for something of that age, I don't think. So I think it works better to have, one elevated church and one down low, and they're just kind of back to back. And then we have this kind of, I don't know if this is like the governor's office or something from the 1600s, but it's, a nice upscale building, just with these basic stairs. And now we're lighting up the pedestrian plaza because we need it to look nice at night, of course. And that's the end of the episode. So thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time on Todos Santos.